start. So, welcome everyone to Culture Reframe's webinar, Let's Talk Porn. My name is Dr. Gail Dines and I am founder and CEO of Culture Reframed. We are thrilled that we have so many people joining us to see just how important it is to understand the pornified world that young women grow up in. For many, this can be treacherous and dangerous, infested with porn predators and hypersexualized images that form the new visual landscape. A landscape that caregivers, parents, teachers, and medical professionals often did not grow up with and often feels like a foreign country. Culture Reframed was founded on the principle that the pornographers, with their misogyny and lust for profits, have hijacked the sexuality of our young people and increasingly older people. And it is our job to not only know about this world, but to find ways to build resilience and resistance into this toxic digital environment. We are beginning to see changes with the age verification bills that are sweeping across the country, where anyone wants access to pornography has to be approved by a third party as being over 18. And especially the new law in the UK that came into being in 2025, which is at this moment the most powerful piece of legislation we have to protect minors. And I'm happy to say that Culture Reframed was very active in getting both laws passed. But along with legislation, we need education and awareness. The webinar is one such example that focuses on young women and listening to them talk about what it's like to grow up in a pornified culture and navigate this new world. Our speakers, Ashley Staggers and Katie Ramsey, will also address how we can work towards change on both the micro and macro level. This webinar is very timely because we have been working with the Youth Advisory Council set up by Culture Reframed that provides insight, knowledge, perspectives from these people directly experiencing this onslaught of pornified world. Together with this, we are also launching a peer-to-peer program where young people will be trained to go out to schools and other places and do peer-to-peer knowledge and awareness training. If you are between 16 and 24 and you're interested in joining us, please email Culture Reframed and just go to our website, culturereframed.org, and you can email us through there. Through our robust courses and other resources for parents, medical and legal experts and educators, we help ensure young people develop healthy, respectful and egalitarian relationships that will sustain them through the life cycle. You can find our courses on our website, culturereframe.org, and we invite you to take a closer look at our website, which is chock full of resources, videos, as well as an academic library. Culture Reframed celebrates its 11th anniversary this year, and we are proud to say that our work has had national and international reach and has been instrumental in shifting the narrative on porn to one that foregrounds the harms done to young people. All our programs and resources are free because we want all people, irrespective of income, to have access to our work. As a non-profit, we rely on donations, however small or large, and it would be wonderful to get more supporters as we enter our 11th year. I would also like to introduce our team at Culture Reframed, Dr. Mandy Sanchez, who is Director of Programming and who will be co-facilitating this webinar, Maggie Damon, who is our Director of Operations and makes all of this possible, Dr. Eric Silverman, our Research Associate, and Nechama Katz, our Director of Foundation Relations. Both Ashley and Katie, who will be talking today, will introduce themselves. But before, I want to say that these young women are brave and courageous. In their own way, they take on the porn culture, and they are unflinching in their unwillingness to let porn hijack our culture. So I'm thrilled to introduce our two speakers, Ashley and Katie. And maybe, Ashley, you would like to go first with a brief introduction to how you got involved in this, who you are and what you've done, and then we'll pass it over to Katie.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shakale. Great to meet you all. It is so lovely to be a part of this webinar. My name is Ashley Staggers. As Gail mentioned, I am a sexual and gender-based violence advocate. I've worked with national organizations such as the National Center on Sexual Exploitation and Rights for Girls. I conduct research alongside the University of Missouri, Kansas City on the prevalence of sexual violence illiteracy and its connection to unacknowledged sexual victimization. Um, I sit on the World Without Exploitation Youth Coalition. I sit on the Day One New York Young Professionals Board, which focuses on interpersonal violence and teen dating violence. And I have the absolute honor of serving as a co-facilitator of Cultural Reframe's Youth Advisory Council alongside our other co-facilitator, Lindsay Morris, and Dr. Mandy Sanchez. And additionally, I hold the title of Miss Manhattan 2026 within the Miss America organization under a platform of calling out the normalization of sexual violence within our culture. And I am just so honored to be here.
Thank you, Ashley. And Katie, would you like to explain who you are?
Hi, so I'm Katie. A lot of people might know me as Cataclysm. I am a content creator who has grown the majority of my audience from talking about the effects of pornography on young people, specifically the normalization of pornography, how this has shaped young people's sexualities, looking at the impact it's had on people's relationships. I'm very interested in how the conversation can be kind of changed, how perspectives can change about pornography, especially through growing up with a lot of voices talking about how pornography is normal and how young people kind of should accept it as, I guess, a coming of age, part of coming of age. Um, I have another social media account called Boiling a Frog, which essentially shares information about the porn industry in a more accessible way, because I think in order to, get more people on board, especially more young people, social media is 100% the way forward with that. I think especially with the now ability to reshare and access more people through social media, I kind of like to focus a lot of the discussions on social media because I feel like it has a further reach. But yeah, I mean, I'm a content creator. That is the main thing that I do. But I think the reason why my content has resonated with so many people is because there is a lack of conversation from young women, especially that opposes pornography, condemns the industry, and highlights exactly why I think more people should be rejecting it and speaking out against it.
Okay. Thank you so much for that introduction to both of you. You can see we've got two very impressive young women. So, what I want to talk about, and sort of the first question, and you can answer this starting with Katie, and then we'll go to Ashley. So, as you said, Katie, that pornography is just everywhere. It's embedded in music, advertising, everywhere. So, can you tell us um, how does the normalization show up? And what concerns you most about it? I mean, to get into doing the podcast, which has, I think, over 300,000 followers on YouTube, um, tell us about the normalization. Tell us about what it's like to live in this porn culture that a lot of the older people wouldn't know.
Okay, so when I talk about the normalization of porn, I often share this anecdote from when I was in school, where there was this one boy in our class who would get teased for not consuming pornography. And even myself back then, it was strange to have somebody who, by the way, we were maybe 12, 13 years old, talk about how they don't watch pornography. To us, to many people that age, it was you were the odd one out to not consume pornography. And it wasn't until I got older that I look back at that and I think how disturbing actually that is. And I think the normalization of porn has definitely been pushed through, I think, a lot of conversation within adults. I think when we see pornography be spoken about as something so casual, I when I was younger, I had a lot of adults would say things like it's just what people do. Specifically, it's just what men do. Boys will be boys. They just consume pornography. It's almost part of being a young person, especially kind of fits in with lad culture. And
Do
I
you want to
think
explain what that
seeing
is, Casey? Because people will only in England will know what lad culture is.
I would say to me, lad culture is almost the condoning of often very misogynistic behavior or sexist attitudes that are almost played off to be funny or just, again, part of being a boy, part of being a man. And I think because it's seen as something more light-hearted, again, talking about pornography in a light-hearted sense, almost teaches everyone around you, this isn't something serious. This is just what people do. I mean, for me, the normalization of porn meant that when I was younger, I had absolutely no second thoughts about accessing pornography myself because everybody around me was doing it. In fact, I felt more strange that it took me longer than everyone else to access it. And I think specifically the reason I focus on social media is because I believe that social media plays a huge role in the normalization of it because it seeps into TikTok, Instagram, any social media account really, I think acts almost as a vessel for young people to then access pornography.
That's great. And we'll be, just to let everyone know, we'll be asking questions later, but I just want to sort of ask one of you and then the audience will get to. Do you see all of this getting worse or getting better?
I think there's elements of it that are getting better in terms of that there is more conversation. I think more people now feel slightly more confident to be able to, create conversations about porn and talk about the normalization of it and just oppose it. But in other ways, I think the fact that schools still haven't made it mandatory to have, an in-depth porn critical sex education means there is a limit to how much progress we can make. I mean, we see on social media all the time the growing, concerning, misogynistic attitudes within schools, with children as young as 10 years old, maybe younger. And I think a big part of this is, a lack of porn critical education because I mean, it was bad when I was in school. If schools haven't took action, then I mean, I can only imagine it will be just as terrible now.
And just to give a plug for Culture Reframed, we do have what I think is the first porn critical sex education for high school, middle school can be adapted to that. And for the teachers, it comes with, well, Mandy, why don't you explain for 2 seconds what it comes with? Because Mandy was head of the program development.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, and Katie, you mentioned 12, 13 years old, and we know that the average age of first viewing pornography for most young kids is 11, 12 years old, and it's getting younger and younger. And actually, educators from the UK came to Culture Reframed and they said, we need something that's porn critical because the UK is mandating sex education for K through 12 in the UK. So they came to us and said, we need something that's porn critical because porn isn't like chocolate, just a little bit won't hurt. We need to actually change this narrative. So we do have a porn critical sex education that starts out with an anti-exploitation framework that has modules for teachers and educators that train them in this area and has step-by-step lesson plans and digital media literacy that really tackles what Katie was just talking about, that lad or bro culture that we see seeping not only in the UK, but also here. And I wanted to get Ashley's take on that growing up in the US to kind of parallel that to see what your experiences were growing up and seeing how that lad culture kind of translates to what we see also as this kind of bro culture here in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of just to tie in all of those
Yeah.
questions and great points. Um, I also think it's really interesting that, porn is normalized in a way where you don't actually need to be going to a porn site to see porn. And what I mean by that is, I've recently gotten into watching old movies. I like them. I think the dialogue is slightly better. But in watching these movies, the climax of the movie is when the two main characters often are kissing, and everyone's like, oh my gosh. And now we get to media today and what's normalized today. And don't get me wrong, I am a huge fan of Bridgerton. I love Bridgerton. But at the same time, I have middle schoolers, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds telling me that they saw the newest season of Bridgerton. And not to be too graphic with it or to be too graphic with it. Um, Last season there was a couple like fingering scenes, and like we're watching them in bed together, and that's a decent portion of the scenes that we're looking at.
Mm.
The seasons before that, not much change. There's a lot of sexually explicit content within those movies, and it's being painted in a romantic light. Um, we're watching movies like 365 Days. The amount of kids that I heard saw that movie, it's concerningly high, especially because in that movie, the main female character is treated as the property of the main male character. And it's again painted romantically. And I was hearing young girls come back and say, I want a Massimo in my life. And I'm like, you want a man who
Mm.
kidnaps you and isn't listening to you and tells you that he's going to respect your boundaries, but then like fingers you while you're tied up. I don't know if you think that that's as romantic as you're imagining it to be. That's not a love story. Um,
Mm.
so we're really watching it unfold in a way where when we say the normalization of porn in our culture, it's you don't even need to be looking for it to be seeing it. And
Right.
then the way that that plays out is in a way where it's still feeding into the norms that the norms that porn gives our culture. Things like, you know, women are the property of men, and that we should be excited about things that aren't super vanilla. We should be excited about
Mm.
being tied up or restrained or choked or all of these things. And that if you're not kinky, like what's wrong with you? And we're also being shown through our culture that you know, guys are being shown that girls are just playing hard to get, that when we're shooing them away, and saying, no, don't touch me, all you have to do is be a little bit rougher and we'll enjoy it a
Mm.
lot more. And so that's playing into bro culture. And, I really talked about a lot of explicit movies, or TV shows, but even going back into basic love stories like The Notebook, how
Mm.
the main male character pressured her to even going on a date with him. And we saw this as like an iconic romantic movie.
Mm.
And
Sweet.
it's,
Hmm.
yeah, are we breaking
Hmm.
down what we're actually teaching girls to accept, um, guys to do? Are we actually breaking down what a relationship is supposed to look like, a healthy, loving relationship is supposed to look like? Um, because at the end of the day, I'm talking to guys who are excited by the game and the chase, but don't actually see me as a person because that's what they've been told is exciting and fun, and that's what they should be looking for. I'm talking to
Mm.
girls who are disgusted by the idea of performing vanilla in the bedroom and are scared about
Mm.
the idea that the way that they are expressing orgasms or pleasure doesn't look the way that they are seeing it on TV, and they think that something is wrong with them. We're seeing erectile dysfunction disorder skyrocket because we're having access to all of these things so young, so early, and there's an addiction happening. And so all of that to kind of say it's so much more than even having access to porn websites, just existing in our culture and watching the movies we're watching, listening to the songs that we're listening to, looking at the examples of love that we're given. It would be a miracle for someone to come out of it with a healthy mindset of what a relationship looks like, what sex looks like, what love looks like.
Mm.
I would like to ask those people, how did you miss every message coming at you that you did manage that? I think what you said about the chase is interesting for men,
Mm.
but let's think about it for girls, is that, and young women, is that first of all, we live in mainly a hookup culture. The statistics are showing that less and less young women are in relationships and more in the hookup culture, which means, you beat them, you barely know them, you have sex, and then they're on to another thing. And what's interesting for when my students were talking about it was they like the chase, but also, and the reason is they feel invisible. And when suddenly this guy seems interested in you, then you become the most visible thing in the world, right? When he hones in on you. But then you become invisible when it's all over. You've had the sex and off he goes to the other hookup. So I think what happens is because of the invisibility, of asking to take the trash out or having a political conversation. Who's interested in women talking about that so much? They don't get listened to. But when they get seen as something that to have a hookup with, for those 10, 15 minutes, you experience a level of visibility that is very unusual. So you've got this game going on, but what studies show is she does not walk away untouched by this. She has psychologically, it's sort of very trying on girls. And you know what? I think we need to do research on boys and see what happens to them in the hookup culture, because the truth is they're developmentally behind girls all the time. And the reason for that, people are saying, and the studies are showing, is pornography, gaming, and just all the time on social media and not developing relationships through the developmental lifespan. So I've got another question, and I'll start with you this time, Ashley. Is that recently Mandy and I spoke to over 700 kids at a high school. And one of the things we really spent time on was the concept of consent. Because a lot of sex ed and people talk about just, consent, 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 just get consent. It's so important to get consent. What is not discussed is sort of what is the meaning of consent in a porn culture. Like, Joanna Angel said, the girls come to the set porn ready. She's a pornographer. And what do you do when girls and young women are being socialized to be sex ready, porn ready, all of those things? What does consent mean in a society where you have been taught to say yes all the time? So, I mean, how do you approach the concept
Uh,
of consent, and what do you think about this?
yeah. It's I don't want to be a negative Nancy about this, but what I will say is, where we're at in our culture, consent is now a revolution. To truly understand what your own personal desires are and what your own personal wants are, and then to be able to vocalize it and then pressure others into listening to you is a revolution in and of itself. And what I mean by that is our culture punishes girls who do not provide access. And that can look like small things, whether that's in tipping culture. It can look like if you aren't playing up the game, you're not going to get as much money as the waiter
Mm,
next to you. And so, in small ways or in bigger ways, where if you dismiss someone because you don't want to end up in a relationship with them, and they don't take it super well, you could die. And we know this.
mm,
We know that you could die. And so, does consent truly exist in a system which doesn't allow you to actually say no? Does it truly exist in a system where you are punished for refusing access to your body in smaller, larger ways, where you're punished for playing against your availability, your sexual availability? Um, my answer to that would be no, quite frankly. And, even just when you're in these situations with someone you love and you care about, um, there's there's this level of dissonance that is often experienced in terms of what are my actual desires versus how do I make you happy? Because obviously there's a level of service and
mm,
love and care and compassion and consideration that is taken into relationships. Um, and we're told all the time that relationships are, what's the word? Compromise. But
mm,
what does that mean for your body? What does that mean for the bedroom? What does that mean for sex? That is something we're not told. And so, even having come out of relationships and listening to friends in relationships are like, well, I didn't really want to, but it seems like it would be helpful in the moment to do that. At what level does that
mm,
become self-harm? Um, at what level are you paying more than you are receiving? Is the cost like way too high? And so, does consent exist in that scenario? I'm not sure, especially when we can't even understand what our body needs in the moment and then stand up and fight for it. I recently said the other day that I will be happy in this world if I have a daughter and she says no and people listen. That that is what I desire for people to be able to say no and others to listen. It's not no, but no, push me harder. No, and it's not, oh, she's tired, but like we can still go through with it. Oh, she has a headache, but it's fine. It's no, and that's okay. And my no isn't going to cost me my life or money, or and I'm not going to be doxxed for saying no. My address isn't going to be out there. I'm not going to be punished for saying no, but I have the freedom, ability, and agency to say no. So my answer is it doesn't exist, and it's extremely revolutionary to actually have a relationship that's built on consent and to be able to understand what consent is. But I would also love to hear Katie's thoughts.
Well, you say revolutionary. I mean, it should be so normal. The truth is, it shouldn't be this amazing.
mm,
We should be this. And I know that for many of my students, They don't say no because you're scared. You're right, they're scared. And secondly, is if they say no and he goes ahead with it, they're going to have to wake up the next day and say I was raped. So what they'd rather do is say I had too much to drink or it was stupid of me and I won't do it again. But there is a real fear of having to take, and understandably so, the actual label of being a rape victim. So I found rape was much more common, and then my students at first would let on. It's only when we got to know each other in class that they could open up and say that.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Mm.
So, Katie, what do you think about all of this with consent? Yes, no?
So I believe that I think there has been a pornification of intimacy. And, I can say that from my own past experiences, but, even just listening to friends and people I know's conversations about sexual scenarios they've been in where their consent has essentially been compromised. And I think, Gail, when I read Pornland, there was this part of the book where you spoke about how, yes is no, sorry, is never a word that you hear in pornography unless the no is purposefully there to be ignored. And I
Mm.
think what that has taught people, I mean, in my own past relationship, I was in a sexually abusive relationship, and I had no idea until I'd left the relationship and spoke to my friends and said, this was happening to me, and I had no idea that this was wrong. And I think part of that was my own idea about my sexual boundaries had kind of been warped and blurred through the years of being exposed to pornography and, all that entails. I mean, just porn pushing this idea that the worst thing you can say to your partner is no, because then that ruins the moment. That isn't sexy. And I think ultimately a lot of young women feeling like they have to say yes to things in order to be the perfect sexual partner. And I think it comes back to this idea that a lot of young people, including myself, feel as if sex is no longer this, meaningful, like you're both getting something from it, you're both enjoying it together, and it's more something that is done to you as a woman rather than something can sit back and say it was a meaningful, loving experience with your partner. And I think, yeah, the normalization of porn has a huge part to play in a lot of women not even understanding that they've been raped or they've been sexually assaulted. Because I think how can a lot of people, for example, feel that they've been raped when their exact scenario or what they've been through is plastered all over, porn sites. So
Mm.
yeah, that's kind of what I think about, consent and the blurring of people's boundaries and idea of what consent actually means.
I think that's a great answer. And I'd also say, people say, yeah, I've been doing this a long time and have heard all the arguments, and people say, well, it's not reality. Well, in fact, it is reality. The way in
Mm.
which you internalize the images, the norms, the values of the pornographic script, you don't have two brains, one that says this is my life and the other one that says this is media, and I'll shove that off there and then I'll go back to the other brain. We
Um,
have one brain that processes in the same way of what goes on. So the idea is this is, although the images are very carefully constructed to give the maximum arousal to men, um, the truth is, we take them as real and we absolutely act upon those. And if you didn't, then who would you be? Because the whole idea of being human is to internalize the norms that are around you. And increasingly, the norms and values are pornified. So this makes perfect sense. It is
yeah.
absolute reality.
Yeah, and I think that the point is that we are learning so much from these images and these scripts, and what we are saying is that they're teaching young people from very early ages who we are, what we like, what we don't like, who we emulate. And we're seeing this over and over, and that's why we're saying, this is teaching us so much about who we are, who we should be, what kind of sex, what sex looks like, what we should find as enjoyable. How do we know what we like? How do we know what we want when there's, no real teacher other than pornography? So how do we build healthy and satisfying sexual relationships? How do we know what we really like and what we really want? And when we talk about, in this world as we're growing up, do we really like Starbucks drinks? Do we really like the things that people are telling us that we should like if we don't have a second to sit back and, like Ashley was saying, do we like being treated like that? Like, should we like those types of relationships? So, when we're talking about sexual scripts and trying to figure out, is this the way we should be treated? Should we center male pleasure? Should women want pleasure? Yeah, and the answer is yes, right? But if we don't have examples of that, how do we know, right? How do we know that that should be a priority? Should this type of violence, like hitting and slapping and being tied up and strangulation and choking, is that something that we should be wanting in our relationships? But that should we be looking for something like that if we don't have anything else to compare it to? So my question really is, what if we can learn these things? And I'm a sociologist, so I think that we can unlearn it, but what does that unlearning look like? Like, if we can learn it, then there's got to be a way that we can unlearn it. So I'll start with Ashley. Maybe you can help us figure out, if we can learn these things, what does that process of unlearning actually look like for girls?
Yeah, I'd say there's a few ways to go about it. One of the
Yeah.
first things is it's both in small and big ways. So in the small personal ways, one of the big things that I like to push forward is figuring out what your deep down is. And you can start with
Mm,
small things. A deep down is what decision would you make if you're not considering anyone else? What is your desire? And this can be so simple. It can be, what do you want to eat
mm,
for dinner tonight? What's your deep down? This can be, what do you want to do with your day? What is your deep down? If you are taking into account no one else's opinions, feelings, desires, whatever, what is it that you want to do? And for the first few months, it's going to be hard. It was really hard for me to be like, what do I want? I don't know.
mm,
Because that voice has been so often socialized to be drowned out and
right.
minimized for the sake of nurturing or caring or all of those things. And the flip side of that is we learn to not listen to the things that it is that we desire. And that
Yeah.
plays a role in the bedroom. You
Yeah.
have to be able to know, does it feel like when I want something? What does it feel like when I don't? What do I desire in this moment? That's
Mm,
number one, first of all. The second thing is questioning everything that you're seeing. I still watch Bridgerton to this day. I
mhm,
love it. But every single time I'm watching it, I'm like, that's not consensual. That shouldn't have been in the script. And I'm still
mm,
enjoying it. It's not, hurting my desire to appreciate the media, but I am able to be like, let me address that really quickly in my own head. It's listening to
mm.
music and being able to say, wait a minute. Something I talk about is this is gonna date me, but the song "Blame It on the Alcohol" and then "Blame It on the
Yeah.
Goose." Yeah, the song is about him getting the girl inebriated enough that they're going to have sex, even though she said that she didn't want to in the beginning.
Yeah.
I love Jamie Foxx's voice. I think it is like butter, but at the same
Mm,
time, being able to critically look at that piece of media and be like, what am I being taught is okay and fun and consensual and desirable? Um,
mhm,
so those are the first two things, figuring out what it is that you want, being able to question the things that you're seeing around you. But then most importantly, I would say that it's about making sure that you're there for your friends. It's a lot harder to be able to label the situations that you are going through, and it's a lot easier to be able to call it out. We often, as survivors, go to our friends first and explain a situation that we are going through. If you are not educated on what sexual violence looks like, you won't be able to help your friends. And
mm,
after that first point of contact, specifically girls are less likely to tell anyone else that it happened, and more likely to go back to that relationship, and more likely to be re-victimized in the future because their violence was never labeled correctly. So if you're telling your friend who was assaulted because you don't know what assault looks like, that it was just a weird experience, it was just bad sex, it was just miscommunication,
mm,
that's how it's going to be processed. And that is how she's going to experience it until she's told otherwise. And so the most important thing is to be educated on what does rape look like outside of what the movies have told me. What does sexual assault look like? What does sexual coercion look like? What does interpersonal violence look like? What does a healthy relationship look like? Because if you do not know those things, so many other people will be hurt in the process. So many other people will be hurt in the process. I can name on one hand how many friends I have who have not been assaulted. Um, and I have probably like a bucket load of friends who have been assaulted and still haven't called it that yet. So it really is about that level of education and understanding, because that's how we protect each other. That's how we protect everyone.
You know what I find remarkable as you're talking and listening to you is how have the schools got it so wrong? Right?
Yeah.
Where are they?
Yes.
Where, they're acting as if we live in in the 1990s and none of this
Or,
is happening.
or the 80s
Yeah,
even.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Mm.
So what do you want? Critically question, be there to call it out and get educated. And I'm thinking about who is there to help kids do this? Who are where are the adults that are helping guide this train, or where's the media influence? Katie, what can you add to that unlearning process?
Well, I think what Ashley said was kind of really resonated with me. This idea that I think even many adults don't have this comprehensive idea about
Yeah.
consent and what sexual violence can look like. I think so many people have this idea that, rape or sexual assault is done by a stranger and it has to be
Mm,
forceful and violent. And it made me think too back when I was in secondary school and I had gone to a house party with all of my friends, and we were 15 and we were drinking. And I was actually sexually assaulted at this house party, to which I had spoke to the only person who was in the house who was an adult, and the adult turned around to me when I was 15 and said, well, you will drink, around people, and you will, act flirtatious. And that was my very first experience of
mm,
opening up to an adult about something that happened to me, and I was met with victim blaming to such
yeah.
a we talk about victim blaming all the time, which often is subtle or is kind of in the undertones of conversations. And to go back to, educators and teachers, I thought, okay, well, that was my first experience trying to reach out, but I'll try and talk to my school. So I reached out to the year room, I guess you would call it. And I
Mhm.
was so nervous that I wrote it down on a letter and I handed it to them. And the woman opened it up and she read it out loud in front of people who were in there. And she just looked to me and
Oh,
said, well, have you told the police? And I said,
Mm, mm,
no. And she was like, well, there's nothing we can do then. And she sent me away.
ugh,
And it was absolutely abysmal. It was terrible. Obviously, at the time, I was very ashamed. It sent me away feeling ashamed because I thought, okay, that's the second adult now who has told me that this thing that has happened was in, my own control and I've done something wrong.
mm,
And, that terrifies me because nothing was done about
right.
that. I wonder how many other children have had similar experiences to me. And it seems like there isn't this, they're teaching and showing these, the consent tea video. I don't know if you have that in the US where it's
Yeah.
like, an unconscious person doesn't want tea. But there is no real serious, comprehensive discussion about it. And I think it's
Hmm.
especially disturbing when we see adults fail to understand how to react to scenarios where young people are talking about sexual violence. And I don't, I bring that up purely because it to me, it represents greatly the lack of education we have to the point where even adults don't have a good understanding of how to talk to victims of sexual violence or
Yeah.
sexual assault, whatever it may be. Um, and yeah, I think until we reach a point where people have, you know, a good understanding of consent and also just how to talk to victims of sexual violence and deal with
Hmm.
these kind of conversations because it's one thing, having the bravery and the guts, so to speak, to say something, but then, to be told essentially by the system that, well, there's nothing we can do
Yeah.
is quite disturbing and very
Yeah.
telling, I think, of where we're at.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Katie.
yes.
You were completely failed by the adults in your space, and that is the failure. That's the failure that you experienced personally. That's what adults are doing to children today, and then we turn around and wonder why kids aren't coming forward, or why we're experiencing this. And then Gail and I say, where are the adults? We need to adult up in this situation. But and then the call is to educate children. Well, maybe the call is to educate the adults, right? And that is a major push for Culture Reframed, to say, yes, our focus is on kids, but adults need to get their shit together too, right? In this situation, because if we look back here, this is our space to protect our kids. And if they have the nerve and, like you said, the bravery to come to us, and then we're just turning away or we're blaming, that makes us no better than the people that are perpetrating crimes against our kids. So yeah, that's a gap. That's a miss. And that's a dereliction of duty on part of the adults in this space.
I mean, I cannot, as I'm listening to this story, the dereliction of duty on the part of adults is kind of mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. And and we see this all the time. I mean, at Culture Reframed, when we go and lecture at conferences on rape, sexual assault, and everything, we would be the only ones talking about pornography. And how come you can go to a conference on sexual assault, on, children's sexual assault, on battery, on any of these things, and not bring in pornography? And I think what we've realized is the reason is they don't know. Right? These are professionals who deal with specifically adults and women and children who've been sexually abused. And this thing is staring them in the face, but they don't see it. And that's why adults need to listen to young people, because you are right in the belly of the beast. You are the ones to tell the story in a way that, as however much, Mandy and I keep up with what's going on, you're always ahead of the game being younger. You know before we do what's going on. So I am just, I'm sure we all are listening to this, kind of finding it unbelievable what was done to you and said to you. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. So sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what else though is that, like, adults themselves are survivors and don't know it. I had to tell my mom that she was a survivor, um, as she was talking about an experience that she went through. And oftentimes we're dismissed because they went through a similar experience and also didn't label it as sexual violence. The amount of covert survivors that exist is insane. And these are the people that we're going to and telling them that we just experienced something. And if they haven't labeled their own situations, how are they meant to label ours? How are they meant to help ours? And it seems so easy and so simple to be like, all you have to do is listen and tell that kid that it's not their fault. And yet somehow it's so hard, because to do that and to acknowledge that for the young person means that they now have to reflect on their entire life and the situations in which they experienced.
Yeah, it's almost like that amount of almost intergenerational trauma that is existing in our world today when it comes to sexual violence and sexual trauma is astounding. It is astounding, and you're right. If we're not labeling it ourselves, it becomes, oh well, I dealt with that too, or like that was just or it's always, well, it wasn't that bad, right? Like it was, that has been told to me once or twice as, oh, well, at least he didn't XYZ, and then it's just dismissed. And then you're like, oh yeah, you're right. Like I didn't have it as bad as that. So then what am I saying? Like I shouldn't be, I shouldn't even have brought that to your attention. It wasn't that bad. So yeah, there's this whole bubble of trauma that we're trying, to get forward. So, when we were talking about putting this webinar together and really creating the Youth Advisory Council, we were talking about we need to speak out to adults. We need to talk. We want young people to message to adults loud and clear. What do we want them to know? What do we want them what do we want to say to them so that we
Mm.
can be better prepared, kids growing up in this kind of porn saturated world. And I think that there would be a lot of things that we would say personally to the adults in our life, looking back, if we would have said, what could have been done or said differently to us, that would help to protect us a little bit more, or what could we say to them now? So, Katie, I'll just start with you. And there might be a whole ton of things that we're all saying that we would like to have said to the couple of adults that you shared. But overall, in general, what would be the message that you would say now to the adults in your world?
So I think that there needs to be more of a conversation centered around the fact that children will come across pornography. I think there's this misunderstanding with a lot of adults that it's like they almost say, well, I just assume my child, I think there's been studies to show
Yeah,
that parents have said, my kid's not doing it, and they are.
yeah.
And I think if you don't even know that your child is having access to pornography, then I mean that's absolutely disastrous because then there's
Mhm.
no tackling of the root issue. When I was growing up, I was always told things like, "You'll never meet a guy who doesn't watch porn. It's normal." And it's just something that you're just conditioned to accept. And I think, I look into the future if I have children, and I know now the conversations that I will be having, with my child, and I won't be presenting pornography as an option. I will be, educating them fully on the harms of it, why they. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't control your child. You're not going to be with your
Right.
child all the time. But your child grows up for a very long time thinking that Santa Claus is real. I feel like it's not too much of a crazy concept to uh, realize that there is a way we can address the root issue, which is educating children at an appropriate age, whatever that looks like at different stages, on that they will come across, pornography. And I think,
Mhm.
looking back to my past relationships and experiences, I've been with people who have had exposure to pornography their whole life, and then I've been with people whose parents have said to them, you're gonna come up, and you can see the difference. You can see the difference
Mhm.
between the men who have been
Yeah.
educated at a young age and the men who haven't been, and even in young women, you can see. Uh, for example, I was exposed to it at a really young age, but I have friends who weren't, and I can see the difference in conversations, how it's
Mhm.
allowed them to have a more, I guess, confident idea of their own sexuality, their own boundaries. And I think I wish I had had more stable, almost role models to look to talk about pornography. Because even when I was, entering into my teenage years, I knew that I didn't like porn, but I was
Mhm.
always told that this is almost a character flaw, that I'm controlling or
Mhm.
I'm insecure. And I think genuinely a lot of that conversation was from people way older than me.
Yeah.
So I wish there were more adults who were, like you guys, understanding of just
Mhm.
how terrible the industry is. And
Yeah.
yeah, I hope that answered your question. I know I have a habit
Yeah.
of little
No,
side rant.
perfect. Perfect. How about you, Ashley?
God, so many ways.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Let me count.
So many ways. Yeah, I have 7 siblings and I'm one of the oldest. And so
Mhm.
part of being an older sister is at some points learning how to raise your younger siblings. And, I've always said to myself that I don't want my little sister to become an expert through experience because there are so many other ways to get an
Mm,
understanding. Um, and that shouldn't be the way that you learn. Um, that you learn. Yeah. So
yeah.
for me, a lot of it is around, first of all, hopping on what Katie said in terms of yeah, first of all, just educating your kid. There is a way to do it that is age appropriate. I start with
Yeah.
elementary schoolers because they're the most likely to be survivors of child sexual abuse. You teach them
Hmm.
that you can say no to adults and it's okay.
Yeah.
If you feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable, you can say no to an adult. I mean, you teach them like first how to say it kindly, then how to say it firmly, and then how to say it loudly so that they can get the attention of other adults in the room. But that saying no to an adult is okay sometimes. That's like
Hmm.
basic education there. And you're not
Hmm.
necessarily saying, I'm doing this to protect you. You're just saying, did you know you can say no to an adult? And kids love that. The
Yeah.
idea of dismissing authority, absolutely. You get
Hmm.
to middle school, and that's when everyone's first boyfriends are. You can play games with them and talk to them about what a healthy relationship looks like. Is it healthy that your partner is keeping you up until 3 a.m. every single night? No, that's not
Mm.
romantic and it's not cute. It's technically sleep deprivation and it's technically manipulation,
Right.
whether they mean for it to be or not. That's not a healthy sign of a relationship. Is it healthy that your partner needs to know where you are and who you're talking to at all times? And if you don't respond, it's not okay? Absolutely not. What's the level between healthy, unhealthy, and abusive? What's cute and like protective and what's crossing
Hmm.
a line. You can
Yeah.
have that conversation with middle schoolers. I'm not specifically talking about sex and porn, but I am talking about something that is affecting their lives at this moment and does actually play a huge role in understanding sex later. You can get to high
Hmm.
school and give them that a better, more comprehensive understanding of sex education. My sex education was we played a game with Jolly Ranchers that dealt with STDs. Blue was
Yeah.
chlamydia, and I didn't understand what we were learning. I just knew I wanted the most blue Jolly Ranchers, and I got them. But like, what did that have to do?
Whoopsie.
I was taught nothing. Then we watched Teen Mom, and it
Mm.
was supposed to scare us from pregnancy, but instead we all had like groups of people we supported the most. I was Team Farrah. She was my favorite mom.
Yeah.
What were we learning? And it's like
Right.
that time would have been so much better spent. I'm sorry. By the time I was in high school, I had already experienced um, 4 years of child sexual abuse. And then I had already been assaulted twice, and men
Mm.
were talking to me in ways that they shouldn't have been because I was a child. Um,
Right.
and now I'm in high school and I'm playing with Jolly Ranchers and watching Teen Mom and having a fantastic time. But what I'm not
Mm.
learning is that I was actually a survivor. What I'm not learning is what is okay? What is, first of all,
Right.
that it's not my fault, that it's not my responsibility for people to, it's my responsibility to say like no, but then it's their responsibility to listen. It's not my responsibility to
Right.
enforce it. They should have listened in the first place. And that no can
Right.
look different ways, and that it's not my fault that like I was wet when I was being assaulted. Like it's
Absolutely.
not my fault. I wasn't being taught any of that, and I didn't know that until I was 22 and having flashbacks. So that's
Hmm.
unfair. Um, and that would have been the perfect time to start discussing baseline things because this is the age in which kids are starting to have sex. Then you can get to college and you can talk about it in a meta way, the normalization of sexual violence in our culture. Absolutely. But
Hmm.
all that to say, there's a way to talk about it at every age level. We need to stop freaking out about the idea of talking about sex. It's not that bad when you really break down what each age group needs to learn. That's number one.
Hmm.
Um, but then beyond that, like adults need to listen more and they need to
Mm.
watch more. I know that life is busy, but if you don't stop and take a break and listen to what your kids are saying, you're gonna miss it.
Yeah.
I, as a survivor, was stopped showering. I got
Mm.
really what's the word called? I became really internal
Yeah.
and didn't want to talk to anyone. I developed an attitude. I would say things like, I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to be in a car with this person. And it was dismissed when I was a kid because I was just
Hmm.
being difficult. No one was seeing the signs. It was just, "Ugh,
Yeah.
Ashley's just being difficult now." And it's like, but did you not notice how I changed? And so
Mm.
taking a moment to stop, look, and truly listen. Taking
Yeah.
a moment to I listen to my brothers all the time, the way that they're talking about women. It doesn't align with the way that like I
Mm.
hope that it should align with them. And if it doesn't, I don't care that you don't want to have this uncomfortable conversation right now. We're gonna go get milkshakes and we're gonna talk about why what you said was
Right.
wrong. Or the fact that, you don't become friends with women just for the intention of like having a relationship with them later on because that's not a real friendship. Just
Mhm.
conversations like that should be had. And then
Yeah.
finally, noticing your power. I am so jealous of men in the sexual and gender-based violence space because the power that they
Mm.
have to speak to other young men is a power that I will
Yeah.
never have. And so stepping into that and acknowledging the fact that like it's not all on us. It is also on you, calling out your friends, calling out
Yeah.
uncles who are behaving grossly, calling out your sons, your nieces, your nephews, any man that you're seeing, because I will never have that power. Um, I will never be able to get it across in the same way. Like if I could yell at every single grown man out there, it's like they're
Mhm.
emulating you. Do something about it because you're not someone that I would want my brothers to emulate. So,
Mm.
anyways, so to
Yeah.
break it down to those three things, it really is. learning how to educate your kids in a way that's age appropriate, learning how to listen and pay attention to what your kids are saying and what they're going through. And then finally,
Mhm.
recognizing your power when it comes to talking to certain groups, because sometimes it really is on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for sharing. And absolutely wasn't on you. And I'm sorry that you experienced the trauma and the devastation that you did. And thank you so much for being so open, both of you, for sharing that. We can learn so much from you and your bravery and your strength. But I am so excited to talk about where we do go from here and what gives you hope, and wrapping this and moving into, because we have a ton of questions. So I do want to get to those as well. But talking about what truly, and adding on to that, Ashley, but also Katie, what is going to shift the status quo here? So where do we go from here? What needs to change? If I could give you the world and say, Katie, you are changing it now. I'm going to give you every amount of resources. Where do we go from here? What do you believe that we need to make a difference in this culture? And what gives you the hope that we can do that?
So I think when you asked me that, like a million things crossed my mind because I guess
Yeah,
it's a very like complex question. But I
yeah.
mean, as we've already kind of covered, I think education is the most vital part of all of this. I mean, I
Mhm.
think it was Ashley earlier that mentioned, it shouldn't take going through terrible experiences
Yeah.
to make you more aware of the terrible things that are going on. I mean, like talking, about pornography and the effects it has on society, it kind of came naturally to me because of my own experiences and because of what
Mhm.
people will often describe as bias, which I
Mhm.
always find silly because, of course, having bad experiences with something is going to make you more aware of its existence, and then naturally you research into it. I mean, I just started off from saying things like, I just don't, I don't like my partner watching pornography. I don't like this
Mhm.
expectancy for me to accept it. And then from there, I took it upon myself to educate myself as much as I can. And I think that's a big starting point. I don't know if it's just a lack of awareness for some people, or it's almost a very overwhelming conversation. And I think even now, being so vocal about it, it is overwhelming. It is sometimes lonely. And it
Mhm.
can feel scary because it's such a huge part of people's lives. And I think that's what we need to
Yeah.
be tackling. It needs to be seen as less taboo to be against pornography and talk about it. I mean,
Mhm.
as someone who is on social media, it often feels like I'm like on the front lines of this conversation because it's treated as divisive and controversial. Saying simple statements such as porn is kind of exploiting women, it's perpetuating gender-based violence. All of these are always met with people
Mhm.
disagreeing, and that concerns me. That scares me, and it doesn't make sense to me. But I think
Mhm.
it is a reflection of the lack of education that we have. So I think education. I think encouraging other people to feel like they can also talk about these kind of things, because I know it sounds so basic, but if when I was younger I had more people just talking about this, I would have felt so much
Mhm.
less alone. I mean, I remember the first time I came across Gail's TED Talk, I felt like I could cry. I remember seeing it on
Mhm.
YouTube and I was like, oh, this will be a great watch just because of the subject matter. And I watched it and I was like, I actually feel so seen. And I was reading the comments, and then I looked more into Gail's work, and I was like, wow, okay, so there is a group of people here who do feel as I do and do
Mhm.
recognize that pornography is such a big issue. I mean, I think Mandy, you said earlier about what are educators thinking, what are teachers thinking. They're
Mhm.
recognizing now that we are seeing a growing level of misogyny, and
Yeah.
young boys acting in ways that are just misogynistic. And it's like, this isn't just happening for no reason. This is
Right.
happening because of a multitude of reasons, but like we established, pornography is such a big part of that. And I think
Mhm.
until more people understand that, which, like I said, with education is, I think, the way that we get there. We're not gonna make any progress. But as bleak
Yeah.
as it sounds, I do think that there is hope. I mean, with Culture Reframed having porn critical sex education, I would like to see more, more schools and just organizations kind of take a bit of responsibility and share these resources and
Hmm.
have it less as an option and more like this should be taught. This is important.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I say that when, because I'm thinking about the world you live in, where feminism or pseudo-feminism has become about empowerment and
Mm-hmm.
agency and everything. And I was thinking what I grew up in, which was the heyday of the feminist movement, and how I had community around me, all these wonderful women, all these events. We had comedy nights. I mean, we had things that surrounded us and wrapped us and held us as we, because the thing is, when you come to realize what patriarchy and misogyny is, it's very scary, and and you need that support to hold you, because then once you know about it, you see it everywhere you go. You can't, you're like, it's like you took off blinders and it's all coming at you everywhere. And I'm wondering, do you have hope for maybe a feminist movement revitalizing itself of your generation that is not buying into all this, sort of pseudo feminist third wave? You're empowered, it's your body, go and use your agency to have sex, etc. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
hope for this, Katie?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I especially, like I said, I keep going back to social media, but I think it's because that's where I've noticed more of a shift. I mean, what you're talking about, this idea of, well, I choose to do this, therefore it must be feminism. I always, reference as choice feminism, and I see more people rejecting that now. This ideology that just because you have the choice to do something, that doesn't make it empowering. That doesn't mean it's the best decision for you. And I do think there is a change with attitudes. I mean, that obviously there's naturally going to be a divide. I always think about, radical feminism and just a lot of these ideologies and narratives that would actually have an impact. Of course, people reject them because a lot of the for example, choice feminism, I mean, it works perfectly with the patriarchy. Of course, men are going to sit there and cheer on, oh, yes, it is empowering to sell your body because they want to feel more normal for buying, your body. Um,
Hmm.
but I do think more people are beginning to recognize that this idea, even recently, this Instagram organization account I follow called My Voice, My Choice, they posted an Instagram post talking about how OnlyFans is hosting, because this idea that now OnlyFans is great because people have their own
Yeah.
agency, neglecting the fact that actually the paywall makes it a lot more difficult as well for investigations to happen into people who are being exploited by pimps in the OnlyFans world. I mean, OnlyFans managers it's a crazy industry now. And they posted that, and I was like, wow, we're seeing a cultural shift. We're seeing a huge organization with 1 million followers call out OnlyFans. Then for an hour later, for them to post something saying something along the lines of, yes, OnlyFans can be empowering. And I just thought, oh, my head was in my hands, and I thought, I was like, I commented and I said, we were so close. Like, so
Yeah.
I was so happy to then be shot down. Um, and I think I don't even blame that organization necessarily. I think there is societal pressure on young
Mm.
women to abide by this idea that empowerment is through selling your body, and that if you choose to do so, who are you to say otherwise? And I think that's the scary part, is being misinterpreted with being so anti-porn, being anti-OnlyFans. It's, I think, often met with this opposition rooted in people thinking that you're, I guess, advocating for purity culture, or you're wanting to remove the agency, which again I always find greatly ironic when it comes to talking about OnlyFans.
Mm.
But I mean, seeing the divide, feeling the support as well as the backlash is evidence that we are seeing some shift within young people, because more people are taking, the position of being like, you know what, no amount of backlash or bullying is going to make me, stand down on your opinions about porn and OnlyFans. And I think if you have people to look up to, as I look up to Gail's work, it makes it less lonely in taking such a stance against porn and similar things.
Mhm.
And this notion of choice, I mean, the truth is, when you end up in OnlyFans or pornography or prostitution because you've got no choice. All along the line, the choices have been closed down to you. So it's the opposite, right? It's not your choice. It's where you have been pushed via economics, via racism, via sexism, all of these things. But a lot of your generation does not have the teaching or knowledge of a structural inequality that goes bigger than you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Ashley, I want to move to you before we go to the Q&A about what gives you hope, and where do you think we should go from here?
Yeah, well, one thing that gives me hope is the fact that I am seeing a lot of videos of coming up of girls questioning the system that we're growing up under and questioning prostitution as an institution, questioning
Yeah.
OnlyFans. And we're talking about now, like what does this myth of reclaiming something that was once used to harm you, um, and then saying that now it empowers you, as if it isn't still causing harm. What myth have we been fed, as a group, as a culture? And I think it's every time that I see another person, another youth upset, I know that we're headed in the right direction. And even to youth,
Mhm.
I would just say, like, be proud of your rage. We're often told that, like, "Oh, women are so angry now, all these things," but I'm like, when you really break down what anger is in and of itself a version of love. It's either saying that you are worth more than the situation that you're going through, or someone else is worth more than the situation that they're going through. It's a declaration of worthiness, and it's a declaration of love, self-love. And so be so proud of the rage that you are feeling at the way that we are being treated as a culture. Be proud of the way that you're the rage that you're feeling in the way that we're educated, or the way that we have to become survivors to even understand what sexual violence looks like. Be proud of
Mhm.
that rage and then do something about it. Um, I hate being told to wait my turn. I hate that I am still to some extent a youth advocate. I'm like, I'm almost 30. But the fact of the matter is that, yes, I understand that that's still pretty young. But the fact of the matter is that I'm watching women in their like 70s and 80s tell me to wait my turn. And I'm like, you did not grow up in the society that I grew up under. Your time is over. Step out of the way. Because when they finally step out of the way, I'm going to be too old and it's going to be someone else's turn. So they need to leave it alone and give us the opportunity to speak and to lead, because we know what experiences we're going through, and we're figuring it out. But the longer that they tell us to wait, the longer we learn to accept what we're being given, to accept the rules that we're being told are ours, to accept what's happening in our culture. And the farther away we get from understanding where that rage is coming from, why it's necessary, and why it's needed. And so that's like my first thing to youth. Like, don't wait your turn. Push down the doors, pull up your own chair to the table, make them pay attention to you. You know more than you think, because we're living it.
Mhm.
And be so proud to be angry, because it means something. It means you love yourself. That's first and foremost. But then, like, moving on from that, um, truly change. Policy changes culture, yes, but culture changes policy faster. We saw policy try to change culture around racism, and that took years. But then our culture decided that gay marriage is okay, and our culture pushed policy to move really quickly on that. So recognize your power. While we wait for sex education policy to change, um, do it yourself. Get out there, protest, talk about it. Because the more that we push and respectfully bully these politicians into doing what it is that we need, the faster that we will see change approach. This is our country. And our government is meant to be a democracy. It's supposed to be for the people. And so force them to be for the people. Tell them exactly what it is that we desire. The longer it is that we remain uneducated and unaware of the issues that are affecting us, the greater hand our government has into not doing anything to address the problem, and to not pushing a comprehensive sex education curriculum, and to not um, I don't know, putting up some sort of firewall behind Bridgerton so that we're not having 10-year-olds watch it, and to making sure that there is no accountability being had. And we're seeing it play out. We see how the Epstein files came out, and people are like, but it's not that big of a deal. Then what is? If that's not a big deal, what is? Um,
Mhm.
get angry, get upset, and talk about it. And like
Mhm.
to the youth, stop waiting your turn. Don't wait your
Yeah.
turn.
Now, I
Yeah.
love the way you put that as well as like, wait your turn. To which I would argue, no, we're not waiting for you to give us a turn. We're going to take
Yeah.
it and we're going
Yeah.
to grab it because you know what? Our turn will never come around. It won't because there'll always be something more important or something like women are always, somehow wait, we'll get to you later. We've got other groups to. So I love the way both of you are going out fighting and saying it is my turn. That's what you're both doing. I'm not waiting for you to grant me a turn. I'm taking it.
And stop telling me not to be angry. I love that. I'm going to be angry and I'm going to be loud and I'm going to be proud that I'm both of those things. I love that too. Okay, I'm going to move on to some questions. There are a ton of questions and we are going to do our best to answer. And at Culture Reframed, we always answer questions. So if we don't get them answered live, we will answer them and in some follow-ups. So the first question, I'm over 60. When I was growing up, teen boys and men had to work harder and earn the privilege to date us and sleep with us. Today, all they have to do is swipe on Tinder to get laid. This puts women at a huge disadvantage because men will dump them quickly if they don't agree to sex on the first or second date. What do the young women on this panel think about the dating culture today?
Do you want to start,
I
Katie?
loved
I
I
have so
love the
many
question
opinions.
Okay.
because
Um,
it's a great question.
I mean, I think that there is. I mean, I'm in a relationship, right? But the way I see it is I would not want to be in the dating scene, looking for a partner. I would not want to be in that position. And for me, I think pornography plays a huge part in this. I mean, I think it's hard enough to find a partner who agrees on a surface level that pornography is bad. I mean, talking to a lot of men, they can agree that maybe pornography isn't great in relationships, but they don't actually know why it's not great, full stop.
Mhm.
So I think as well, with there being such access to pornography and OnlyFans, and even now AI, and this growing, I guess, reinvention of misogyny using technology. So we're seeing people talk to, uh, you know, AI girlfriends and seeing things like sexual relationships with AI girlfriends. There is almost no urgency or there's no need anymore for young men to seek out meaningful relationships with women because why should they? I recently saw a YouTube video about this one guy who spent over £50,000 on spent on talking to girls through, I guess, a social media site kind of similar to OnlyFans, where you pay to have a virtual girlfriend. And he basically
Mhm.
described it as, why would I seek out real relationships when my online girlfriend will do whatever I want? She's not going to say no to anything. Essentially, she's not going to be a bitch. She's not going to
Mm,
drag her heels in the mud. And I think with technology growing, we're going to see more and more of that. Yeah, I don't think the dating scene is at all in a good
yeah,
spot, to be honest.
Yeah,
yeah,
the dating scene is horrendous. And but I think that there are ways to make it better. I understand the situation that we are in, but I mean, I hold a responsibility to both parties. One, like if they're going to go on to someone else, let them. Like,
mm,
why do you think
mm,
that now you get access and for like a privilege to my body? Because I like that
yeah,
doesn't make sense to me. So there's this movement in Korea called the 4B movement where women are essentially saying until men get better, we won't date them, we won't marry them, we won't have their kids, and we won't have sex with them. Those are like their four things. Um, I commend that because at the end of the
mhm,
day, if we're apparently the prize, I'm going to stop you from getting it because I'm so much more than that. I am a person and you're not treating me as such. So why do you think that you get all of this pleasure? Um, like, no, that's just, we're not doing that. So I think that there is a way to revolt, in a way where it's like, together as a society, we have decided you will not have access to our bodies. Um, and then beyond that, though, like for men, you need to start calling out your friends. Why is it that, the way that they're talking about sex is, oh, I railed her. Oh, like I
Mm,
got late. I got this, I got that. And it's like, why is it always something to get? Why is that the first question you guys are asking after he comes back from a date? Why is it, hey man, like, and then what happened? Why is it never just about the relationship in general? And so, like, either this can happen so many different ways. Either they get it together and they step up, or we can refuse access. Because at the end of the
mm,
day, if you settle and you marry this person, you are spending a large portion of your life with them. And I'm not wasting my life on someone who isn't listening to me, doesn't hear me when I says no, when I say no, treats me as property, doesn't see me as a full, valuable human being with her own thoughts, feelings, and opinions, who is quite honestly the best thing to ever happen to you. So, anyways, all of that to
mhm,
say, it's the question that we should be asking is, and so what? And let them, because we can give in to that culture. We can be like, oh, but I don't want to be alone. Oh, but I just want someone to hold me. And it's like, okay, and then what life are you setting yourself up for by doing that? Um, if a guy wants to go date his AI girlfriend because they won't say no, let him. Thank God he's out of the dating pool. That's the way I see it. If a guy wants to
mm,
go on to someone else because you're not giving him access to your body, let him, because he's not someone you would want to give access to your body to in the first place. If a guy wants
mm,
to like rant and rampage and say that he's gonna like mess with your friend, let him, and leave that friend. Like, there's so many ways to go about it where it's not
mhm.
about giving in. Um,
Yeah,
you can still revolt in small, amazing, awesome ways.
yeah. Gail, did you have any other ones, or did you want me to continue going through that? Okay, okay. Um, Quite frankly, young women have been so heavily coerced into having sex without any ties now that men have basically succeeded in eroding the basic self-protective mechanism, which I understand is inherent instinct within the female sex, even without the influence of societies, family, and friends. Women have been reduced to living dolls. Do you concur? That's the question.
Should I go first?
Yeah, Katie.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think that leading on from what Ashley was talking about, I think a lot of the time there is this um acceptance of, I guess, just accepting the position that you're in, and what's been given to you by someone who's interested in you, or even a partner. I think there is this element of almost submission to the position that you are in, and acceptance of the position that you're in, and accepting the treatment that you're receiving. Um, yeah, sorry, that I don't know if that really answered the question all
Yeah.
too well. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's my initial thoughts.
Yeah, my thought is, in the eyes of guys, we're reduced to living dolls. In the eyes of those like
Mhm.
coming after us, we're reduced to living dolls. And I did this experiment where I was trying to understand um how flirtation happens, and how you approach someone when you have an end goal in mind. So for about a month, I was going into bars and stuff, and I would approach a guy with the intention of, can I get him to buy me a burger by flirting hard enough? The intention was never sex, but it was with the same intention in mind, because I wanted to see how a guy talks to a girl when the only reason he's talking to her is to get her in bed. And there is this what I realize, and one day I'm going to write about it, is that there's a certain level of dehumanization that has to take place in order for you to have those conversations. The only way I could have those conversations is if I didn't care about the person and I saw absolutely no interest in them. I had to dehumanize them in some manner or level in order to accomplish this game and get to my goal, because I needed to somehow not take them into consideration, and then I could play up to every single one of their fantasies, so I could get myself a burger with some fries and
Mhm.
a milkshake. They do the
Mhm.
same thing for sex. And so being reduced to living dolls, and that sort of, yeah, when the end goal in mind is sex and it's not the person and it's not a relationship, that is what's going to happen. And I do think that that goes back to a re-education of men and also men educating men on the role that women play in their lives isn't to be a doll of pleasure. It isn't to be a companion. It isn't to be a pet. It isn't to be an added piece into their lives, but that they are in and of themselves whole people. And they should be treated as such. And if you care about someone, you would never, ever approach a conversation in that manner. So I hear what you're saying. I do think that in some level that is true. And we just need to understand that when we're having these conversations with them, are you looking at me or are you looking at the end goal?
Mhm.
There's,
We get a lot of,
sorry.
oh, I'm so sorry. We get a lot of, we hear a lot about having conversations. Having conversations with kids is so very important, but we also hear, how do we approach this without shame? Because there's so much shame and guilt in terms of watching pornography, or how do we talk this without shaming or blaming? And at Culture Reframed, that's one of the number one things that we talk about. So we have a question in the Q&A about being open with preteen or teenage daughters. How would you recommend continuing having conversations with preteen or teenage daughters and maybe even other children their age about how porn is represented in our culture without instilling feelings of shame or guilt or fear, and to avoid those conversations without shaming, blaming, or fear?
Well, I personally think that a big part of it is educating your children to, I guess, see pornography as something that intends to get your attention, intends to draw you in, intends to uh, essentially, groom you in a sense into believing that, pornography is normal. Um, I think, again, referencing Gail's book Pornland, there was a section talking about how on porn sites, they have these kind of pop-up messages and these texts that kind of talk directly to you. And I think a big part of that is with the intent to, convince young people that this is something, that everyone's doing, despite obviously that directly contradicting how they probably feel within themselves, because it is something, I mean, just masturbation in general, is something that I think people conflate with pornography. And I think that's a big part of it, is young people, assuming that the only way that they can masturbate is to pornography. And I think that kind of plays a big role in the shameful aspect to it. And I think also a big part of shame and embarrassment is the fact that adults aren't talking about it in the first place, meaning they probably, I think when I was younger, I used to think like, when I was accessing porn and I'd seen porn, I used to think like, I wonder if, my parents know, or like if they found out, they'd be really angry. But it
Mm,
wasn't me thinking this is probably really bad for my mental health and my sexuality. It was never that. It was like, this is definitely not good. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm going to be in trouble.
mm,
Um, so I think if there are more open conversations about porn, obviously going back to this idea of having age appropriate conversations, then I think it removes more of this sense of embarrassment and shame. And
yeah.
yeah, I'd say that would be a good starting point. It's just having general conversations about it so it's not left
Mhm.
too late, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd also say the way you talk about it matters. If you make it a big deal, it's going to be a big deal. If you inherently believe that there is some sort of shame tied to it, it's going to come across. Kids are smart. They pick up on
Mm,
things very quickly. And I learned that when I'm talking about harder things, like calling out my brothers for certain behaviors or certain thoughts or opinions, um, I often will like try to bring it up naturally when I hear something that they're saying or we're watching something. Like that really helps because then it's not like a sit down hard conversation. Um,
mm,
Or I make the environment a little bit easier. We go grab milkshakes and go on a walk. And I'm like, I was thinking about this thing the other day. And then that is a natural, easy conversation. When you remove that stigma of shame, of like guilt, of um, this is a rough conversation I'm having it with you because I'm your parent and you need to understand this. And you
Mhm.
make it more of a conversational flow. It allows them, one, the freedom and the ability to ask questions, to question what you're saying, to question what society is saying, to bring in their own ideas, feelings, and opinions, and for it to truly be a conversation. But secondly, it also leaves the door open so that they can come back later and have that conversation with you without it always being a big deal. I'm a preacher's kid.
Mhm.
I know what it means to grow up in a situation in a household where there is like really hard, tough conversations, and sometimes that closed the door. So definitely just make sure that um, yeah, your own inherent beliefs about the seriousness of the conversation aren't creating a situation in which you're accidentally shutting them out, but allowing for free flowing, ever going conversation around things.
Perfect.
Well, we'd like
Thank you
to
so much. I'm going to send it over to Gail, but thank you
thank
so
you.
very much for both of you.
First of all, I'd like to say that I'm probably feeling what most people are feeling on this is we are just blown away by
Mm.
you two. I mean, your bravery, you're so coherent, you're so, I mean, your conceptual building, but most of all, just how brave you are to stand up in this culture and make it clear how you feel. And I learned so much listening to you and the grace with which you do this. Um, and I want you to know you've got our support at Culture Reframed. I know we're older than you, not much, but just a bit. And uh, you've got us, right? So, and I was thinking if you were talking, one of the best ways is to let's think about how do we rebuild a culture that gives you support and many like you? Because there's going to be many young women like you, and they're going to want support. So maybe at Culture Reframe, we should talk about how do we offer a place, and I know we are doing that increasingly, to get together, to basically bring young people together. So thank you for sharing everything that you did. I know a lot of it was personal and it couldn't have been easy. Um, what I want to end by is by saying to people, if you want to know more, if you want to understand more, go to our website, culturereframed.org. It is chock full of information, of articles, of great videos, books, everything that you need. I mean, basically, you can spend the next 15 years on Culture Reframed, especially our programs. If you teach sex ed, I encourage you to go to our sex ed program. We will be doing more of these webinars. We're also planning on starting podcasts as well to interview people. But I think the most important thing I would say is having, a son, is that, once we decided to bring these kids into the world, we took on the culture for our children. It was our job. And we do feeding, we do clothing. I mean, we clean up after men's messes. I mean, all of those things. But the most important thing in the world was to provide a culture for your children to grow into healthy adults. And that's, I think, our commitment. And I think to myself, when people come to us, that some young person at some point will come to us and say, where were you? What did you do to stop this culture just being, deteriorating like this? What did you do? And you can shrug your shoulders and say, sorry, I didn't do anything. Or you can say, I fought with everything I had in me to fight this pornified culture. And if we change the I to the we, you know what the last sentence will be? We won, because together we are unstoppable. And I have to say, women especially, as we've seen today from these two wonderful women, are unstoppable. And that's how we feel at Culture Reframe. We will not give in. We will fight the pornographers tooth and nail. And somebody once said to me, what's your hope at the moment? I said, my hope at this moment is that the pornographers don't sleep because they're worried about Culture Reframe. I hope we're in their heads and they worry about us all the time because we're coming after them. There's no question we're coming after them. And so, again, thank you for joining, everyone. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. and join our organization. We are also a non-profit. A non-profit means you don't make a profit, which means you have to reach out for donations. And we're very lean, so your money is never wasted. And we hope to see you back at our future webinars. We'll let people keep in touch with you to let everybody know about when we start our podcast. Thank you, Mandy, for doing such a wonderful job as well. And I want to thank both Mandy and Maggie who put this together. And just, I feel so blessed to be working with such wonderful people. And I feel blessed to know you two as well. So thank
And
you.
we're hiring. So if you want to come work
Yes,
with us, check out our
I wrote
website.
that in big letters and I didn't look. We are hiring. So please go on our website and look for what we're hiring for a assistant to the director of
For
program.
me.
And let me tell you, she's great to work with. So there's a push.
Yay.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a good day. And if you need to go out for a walk after this or just take some time to revel in the beauty of the world as well. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.